How you doing, fight fans? EJ Boxing Live here. So we're continuing the Caribbean's greatest fighters of the decade, and we have here from the 1950s and 60s, but more in the 50s, where Joe Bygraves was successful, winning the Commonwealth belt against Henry Cooper. Also went on to fight Ingelman Johansson twice, Zora Foley, and George Chuvalo. And he basically fought the who's who at the time in the 50s and 60s heavyweights. Very successful, and the first Jamaican guy on the list of Caribbean greatest fighters. I'm sure there's gonna be probably more, but a really good fighter. And I hope you guys enjoy it. So what we're gonna do, box and beat some rhymes, give his take, get your popcorn ready, sit back, relax, and enjoy the career of the Kingston Jamaica born Joe Bygraves.
Bygraves left Jamaica as a young boy and took up boxing as an amateur in England. Became a British subject in 1967. Refused shot at British heavyweight title because he was not born in Britain. Joe Bygraves. Joe was one of 12 children to a Jamaican police sergeant. Joe Bygraves was born in Kingston on the 26th of May 1931. He was 15 when he came to England hoping to study for a trade, in his case an electrician. 3 of his brothers also accompanied him, 2 settling in London, with Joe and another deciding on Merseyside. Then, aged 17, that Joe became more interested in boxing and joined the provincial ABC. He set off with the simple and modest aim of winning an Olympic title. Before joining the provincial, Joe had a number of schoolboy bouts in Jamaica. The results aren't known. It was not long before he began to show great promise in the amateur game. He won Northern Counties titles at both light heavyweight and heavyweight, and a West Lancs and Cheshire light heavyweight championship between 1949 and 1952. He also represented England, along with Henry Cooper, a future opponent, Pete Waterman, and his fellow club member Pat McAteer, against Wales in May 1952. Joe lost this bout as well as his ABBA semi-final the same year, and so after he decided to turn professional. It was an amateur referee who was the cause of Joe turning professional and taking his great friend Pat McAteer with him. Following a disagreement, Joe became disillusioned with the amateur game and talked Pat into the same frame of mind, and together they joined Johnny Campbell's stable in Birkenhead. Joe earned his living outside of the ring as a ship's painter. Joe made his professional debut at the Liverpool Stadium on the 12th of February 1953, stopping Don Maxwell, Nottingham, in the first round. He followed this victory with 6 straight wins, including a first-round stoppage over former ABBA champion Peter McCann, who also lived in Birkenhead. Joe was rapidly becoming a firm favorite of the knowledgeable Liverpool Stadium fans. Despite his chosen profession, Joe was a deeply religious man, and along with his good friend Honeyghan Kid Basie, another Liverpool fighter, were staunch supporters of the Prince's Gate Baptist Church in Liverpool. When a boxer wins their first 7 contests, he is assured of attracting attention, and Joe was to be no exception. He was beginning to get noticed, and for his next contest he was asked to travel to London's White City to take on Stepney's Joe Crickmore. It was a step up in class for Joe, and he suffered his first defeat, a 5th-round stoppage, despite losing to Crickmore in a quick return just a month later. Joe gained his revenge at the Liverpool Stadium in March the following year when he scored an 8 points victory. Wins over the highly rated Paddy Slavin, Frank Bell, Peter Bates, and Bermuda's Ed Polly Smith saw Joe continue his rise up the rankings. Like Joe, another young heavyweight was rising fast in the rankings, Bellingham's Henry Cooper. And the exciting young prospect was Joe's next opponent at Manor Place, Baths, in April 1955. Joe was adjudged the loser over 8 rounds, but just 2 weeks later he got back to winning ways with a 4th-round KO over Battersea's Eddie Hearn at the Liverpool Stadium. A win over the dangerous Tongan sensation Gideon Lave, always a star attraction wherever he appeared in Britain in the 1950s, followed in Birmingham. Joe's services were now being sought by European promoters, and in October 1955 he traveled to Bologna, Italy, only to be disqualified against Franco Cavici. He returned to Italy 6 weeks later, however, to spectacularly KO the highly rated Aldo Pellegrini in just 50 seconds. Earlier in the year, Pellegrini had decked Ingemar Johansson before being disqualified himself. Although a big man with a bodybuilder's physique, Joe was a clever, fast fighter. He did suffer from a stamina problem, however, due in no small way to his training methods. By his own admission, Joe disliked training, especially road work. It was this lack of dedication to training that led to a split between Joe and Johnny Campbell. Joe was also running his own nightclub at the time on Liverpool's Upper Parliament Street, and this may have been a contributory factor in his failing to train fully. Joe may have felt, however, that he didn't need to train as hard as he should, because if there was one thing he could do, it was punch. There was no doubt that if he managed to hit you, you stayed hit. In January 1956, Joe returned to Italy and beat local boy Uber Baccellieri on points over 10 rounds. A remarkable achievement. Indeed, it was said that a foreign boxer often needed to KO the home fighter just to gain a draw in Italy at the time. The following month, Joe had another trip abroad, this time to Gothenburg. Again, he was adjudged a points loser over 10 rounds, but there was no shame in this, as his opponent was none other than the Hammer of Thor himself, Ingemar Johansson of Sweden. Johansson had KO'd 7 of his 12 opponents as a professional previous to his meeting with Joe, and he would win the European title just 2 fights later. The Swede would of course go on to win the world title in 1959. Joe got back to winning ways with an 8-round stoppage win over tough Belgian Marcel Limage in Cardiff. This was in May 1965, and a month later Joe was matched with previous opponent Gideon Leif for the vacant British Empire heavyweight title. After 15 hard-fought rounds at Wembley Pool, the referee raised Joe's hand to declare him the winner on points. The big Jamaican, a champion at last, was scared of no one, and over the next 12 months he met all of the leading British contenders. Following a disappointing retirement loss against Wayne Bethia in New York, Joe was matched against former British Empire and European champion Johnny Williams of rugby for the first defense of his Empire title. This contest saw him back to his brilliant best, and he stopped Williams in the 6th round at Bellevue, Manchester. Next up was another old opponent, Henry Cooper. It was Cooper's first title shot. But Joe was again on superb form, and he sensationally KO'd the future champion in the 9th round at Earl's Court. A further defense followed, this time against another future champion in the shape of Newport's Dick Richardson. Their May 1957 meeting in Cardiff resulted in a draw, which of course meant Joe kept his title. A disputed 15 rounds loss to Joe Erskine in Leicester in November 1957 saw Joe relinquish the crown, and although he boxed on for a further 10 years, he never fought for a title again. In his 72 professional contests, Joe met some of the country's, and indeed the world's, top heavyweights. Not only did he meet the likes of Cooper, Erskine, Richardson, and Johansson, but he also fought such men as Zora Fowley, Carl Mildenberger, Jack Gardner, Billy Walker, and Willie Pastrano. He had a total of 19 bouts in Liverpool. He lost a 5th round disqualification against Ray Shield in August 1963, whilst his final contest came at the Anglo Sporting Club at the Hilton Hotel, London in March 1967. A 10 rounds points defeat to Eduardo Corletti of Argentina. After Joe retired from boxing, he had a 160-acre pig farm in Stanmore, Middlesex. He used to name his boars after former opponents. He had one called Dirty Dick after Dick Richardson. One day the pig called Dirty Dick bit him, and he had to go to hospital for stitches. He told Dick what happened, and he roared with laughter. He had a boar called Harry Gibbs after the famous ref Billy Walker and George Truvale, to name a few. in 1984, and we heard after his funeral that Joe had sold the farm and moved back to Jamaica as well as raising animals. Joe built a training camp for boxers and would often let old-time fighters stay at his Portuguese villa he had acquired during his boxing days. Although Joe's post-boxing career is difficult to ascertain, he now lives in Jamaica and Portugal, although not in the best of health. And the Sunday Gleaner, the 20th of April, 1958, 2 boxers will climb between the ropes in Leicester, England, tomorrow, and be called together by the referee before fighting out 10 rounds. One will be tall, handsome, curly-haired Willie Pastrano, rated the 4th best heavyweight in the world. The other will be a 14-stone, 3-pound giant, Joe Bygraves by name, the former champion of the British Empire, who is making a comeback to the ring. This contest will undoubtedly be the most important in the whole of Bygraves' career, for it will decide whether he goes to America with the hope of eventually meeting the world heavyweight champion, Floyd Patterson, or whether he hangs up his boxing gloves and becomes one of the ring's many has-been. Who is this fellow Joe Bygraves? How did he get into boxing? And just how did he become a champion? To find the answers, let us go back 10 years, when Bygraves was a chubby, well-built kid of 16, in England to seek fame and fortune, but not as a fighter. N0 Joe did not know how box when he set foot in England. He had never put on a boxing glove in the whole of his childhood in Kingston, Jamaica. Why should he? He did not want to become a fighter. He landed in Liverpool and eventually got a job on the docks. He liked Liverpool, so he stayed there. Often he wrote back to his folks at home. Joe's father was a detective inspector in the Kingston police force, and he had 5 brothers and 6 sisters. Then Joe got himself into boxing. It all started as an accident. He was loafing around on a street corner, as he used to do often during the evening after work, when he saw the shadow of a man coming towards him. Without hesitation, Big Joe turned and fled. He explained later, "I had never forgotten the night I got a real beating from my dad for standing on a street corner in Kingston. Now, when this guy came down the road towards me that night in Liverpool, I just ran and ran because he reminded me of my pa." He sat down and thought it all out. "I came to the conclusion I was doing myself no good, hanging around street corners and wasting away my time, so when a pal asked me to go with him to a local boxing club, I agreed to go. But only to watch. But of course he did not stay watching for long. I put on the gloves one night, just for a bit of fun. Some guy hit me, so I hit him back. He never touched me again. And I guess that is how I first started fighting." Mr. Johnny Campbell, a local engineer from Birkenhead, very interested in amateur boxing, saw Joe, noted his enthusiasm, and when he found himself short of a heavyweight, he asked Joe if he would like to take up boxing seriously as an amateur. Joe said simply, "I don't mind, I'll have a go, sir." That was the beginning. Then began the serious business of getting Bygraves into fighting condition, teaching him how to box correctly, how to use his tremendous strength in delivering each punch, how to take a punch on the chin without going down, how to maintain his stamina throughout a fight. Joe was a very quick learner, says Mr. Campbell, who is now his professional manager. He would always take advice and never complained once of hard work. "I was never a bad sort of bloke," says Joe, today, with a grin. "The worst things I ever did were to purposely forget to pay my bus fare or sneak into the pictures without paying. But that unknown man who frightened me into running away gave me back my conscience. Now I'll chase after the conductor if he forgets to take my bus fare." Sulfur monoxide Joe turned boxer. He went into one fight after another, winning. He was a sensation, almost overnight. There was one snag. Joe was a very moody young man. Often he felt lazy. He would box as though he was half asleep. Let anyone hurt him, however, and Joe soon changed his mood. He would turn swiftly into a menacing, vicious fighting machine, slashing and chopping at his opponent until he dropped. "I just don't like getting hurt," said Joe, explaining his ferocity in the rope square. Then came the end of his amateur career, and that, too, was purely an accident. Joe was fighting in the England vs Wales match in 1952 when he was disqualified in the third round after having his opponent on the canvas a number of times. When the referee sent him to his corner and declared his opponent the winner, Joe saw red. He turned and grappled with the referee. Mr. Campbell turned to see the referee on the floor. Boxing enthusiasts at the ringside said Joe struck the referee. Whatever happened, Joe was suspended for 6 months. I was so upset and so fed up with amateur boxing that one decided to turn professional. Joe told me. He asked Mr. Campbell if he would manage him. But he was a strictly amateur enthusiast when Joe pleaded with Bun, "Please help me win a title." Mr. Campbell, he changed his mind. So the faithful partnership of Bygraves and Campbell was established. Joe made his debut into the profession of paid boxing by knocking out a promising young heavyweight, Don Maxwell, in exactly 65 seconds of the first round at Liverpool Stadium on February 12, 1953. His bulging muscles and magnificent physique and the fire with which he fought soon earned Joe a host of admirers. Joe lost only 4 of his first 28 fights, and it was not long before he was being considered as a title prospect. His terrific punching made Bygraves a feared man in the ring. His big chance came in April 1956, when he met the former British heavyweight champion, Jack Gardner, in London. Joe created a sensation by stopping the ex-guardsman in 2 rounds. Such a victory put Joe well on the way to a championship fight. After stopping Marcel Limage in 7 rounds in May 1958, Bygraves was matched against the tough Tongan fighter Gideon Lave in London for the British Empire title. The Jamaican became champion after one of the most brutal battles in ring history. The kid from Kingston was there. "One always wanted to be a champion ever since I first took up fighting," said Joe. "When I gave up amateur boxing, I was determined to show them I could make the grade as a professional scrapper." He wanted to put his native Jamaica on the map. "I wanted the folks back home in Kingston to be real proud of me, 'cause I was sure proud of my homeland." But despite his viciousness as a fighter, outside of the ring, Joe was a quiet, unassuming guy, liked by everyone who knew him. Johnny Campbell once told me, "Joe is very religious. He will never train on a Sunday. He goes to church instead, and often reads the lesson from the pulpit." Joe soon became known as the Quiet Champ, the idol of every kid in his district of Liverpool. Joe makes no secret of the fact that he does not like training. Realizing that it is all part of being a professional fighter, however, he accepts it with a smile. In September 1956, 3 months after winning the British Empire Heavyweight Championship, Joe went to America with his manager, Mr. Johnny Campbell. He had already fought in Germany, Italy, and Sweden as well, of course, in various towns and cities in Great Britain, but this was his first visit to the USA. The trip proved to be a disappointing one. Joe received a big American build-up, but he was forced to retire after 5 rounds of his fight with the American, Wayne Bethia, in New York. He later explained the end of that fight. "People may have thought I was getting out of it because I was yellow. That wasn't so. I just felt my arms and legs go limp on me. It was no good going on after that." He returned to Britain and his headquarters on Merseyside and prepared for his next fight. It put him back in boxing's good books, for Joe stopped another former British champion, Johnny Williams, in 6 rounds. A fight with the up-and-coming Henry Cooper followed, in which Bygraves put his Empire title at stake. He earned admiration from all quarters when he said, "I am prepared to put my title up every time I fight." He knocked out Cooper in the 9th round in London in February 1957. 3 months later, he put the title up again, this time against Dick Richardson, a tough, hard-hitting Welshman, tipped by many in the next British and Empire champ. Joe drew with Richardson over 15 rounds, the contest being fought on the Welshman's own doorstep in Cardiff. A visit to Germany followed. Joe met Heinz Neuhaus, Germany heavyweight champion and one-time contender for the world title. It ended in defeat for the 25-year-old Jamaican when the referee disqualified Joe for boxing on before being told to do so after knocking down his opponent in the 6th round. Again, ringside spectators said it was a case of Bygraves being too anxious to go in for the kill. Joe never once predicted a fight. Whenever he was asked by a newspaper reporter if he was going to win a certain fight, the young man from Jamaica would always reply, "I don't know if I'll win or not. But I can tell you one thing, the guy who steps in with me will certainly know he's been in a fight," and he always kept his word. Outside the ring, Joe lived up to his reputation as the quiet champ. He spent most of his spare time in the cinema and playing records at his cousin's home in Liverpool. By now Joe was not getting homesick anymore, for he had 4 brothers and 2 sisters in England. His popularity increased as he readily accepted invitations to open garden fetes and collect money for charities. Then came the end of the reign of the quiet champ. In November last year, he put his Empire title up for the 3rd time in a year against the clever British champion, Joe Erskine, reckoned to be the fastest heavyweight boxer in Europe. After -15 rounds of fierce slugging, Bygraves lost his precious title. He could not catch up with the fast and elusive Erskine, try as he would to land a knockout punch. Bygraves lost all right, but he is the gamest fighter we have ever seen, said many people at the ringside at the end of the contest. Naturally, Joe was disappointed. More than anything, he wanted a return fight with Erskine to prove that he could beat him. Joe was really off form. "We are both confident he could beat Erskine if they fought again," his manager, Mr. Campbell, told me. With the loss of the title, Joe laid off training for a few months. He was not seen in his training camp in Birkenhead for nearly 2 months, when he opened a nightclub in Liverpool to provide him with some form of business for when his boxing days were over. Some folks said Bygraves had retired from the ring for good. "Nonsense," said Big Joe, annoyed at the rumors. "I aim to show I'm still a champ." He returned to boxing 2 months ago, and quickly set about the task of getting back into perfect fighting condition. On February 10th, he climbed between the ropes once again and faced the rugged Joey Armstrong from Ghana. Armstrong is a highly rated boxer. Ringsiders were betting on the result. "Armstrong will outbox him," said most of them. They did not know Bygraves, fighting almost like a beast. He chased his opponent round the ring, punching him mercilessly from corner to corner. He was in such a fierce mood that his manager had to tell him to cool off. The fight lasted under 3 rounds, before the referee intervened to save Armstrong suffering further punishment. Joe Bygraves was back on the title trail. "All I want now is a fight with Erskine, so that I can win back my Empire title," Joe told his manager. But another boxer, Brian London, was nominated instead to meet Erskine for his British and Empire titles. Bygraves was left out in the cold. There was only one thing to do. Joe realized he had to prove his capabilities. He threw out a challenge to the American, Willie Pastrano, currently rated the 4th best heavyweight in the world. Pastrano has accepted the challenge. Joe and Pastrano meet tomorrow in Leicester, England. The Jamaican is confident of victory, despite the fact that the odds are 8 to 1 against him beating the American. Whether he wins or not is unimportant. What does matter is that Joe Bygraves, the man who left his native Kingston as a kid to seek fame and fortune, has found both. If he beats Pastrano, he will go to America again, this time with various offers to meet the best fighters in the world. Probably he will get a match with world heavyweight champion Floyd Patterson. If he loses, well, he has tried. And no one can ever say Bygraves is not a treer. The secret of Bygraves' success? Joe sums it up like this: "I reckon boxing is in my blood. You can laugh and joke at me as much as you like when I'm not in the ring. But man, once I've climbed into the ring, you're no friend of mine anymore."
Now, the Windrush generation brought in a new dynamic to British boxing. Like we see a lot of Caribbean fighters getting in on the act, fighting for the Empire title. Joe Bygraves. Bygraves, you know, he fought from the 1950s in the UK, plying his trade at the stadium, Liverpool, quite a lot from what I'm seeing. No recognizable names. In 1955, he took on Henry Cooper and loses on points in London. Still plying at his trade, fighting abroad in Germany, Italy, mostly wins. He loses on points to Ingemar Johansson. He beats former British champion Jack Gardner. He becomes Commonwealth, British Empire champion, defeating Kittion Lave on points at Wembley. Former Sonny Liston victim Wayne Bethia, he stopped him in New York. He goes on to beat Johnny Williams, former British and Empire champion. And he stops Henry Cooper in the 9th with a body shot, defending his Commonwealth British Empire title. Stops him with a body shot, you know. He went on to fight the likes of Zora Foley, Roy Harris, and he was fighting at world-class level for a long, long time. Carl Mildenberger, Ingemar Johansson again lost on points, George Chavallo, right until the end of his career. And apparently the first fight with Cooper was very tight, which they gave Cooper the decision. He had a great physique, he was a good puncher.
And that's why he's on the list of the greatest Caribbean fighters of the decade. Joey Bygraves from Jamaica, born in Jamaica. We salute you. Hope you guys enjoyed listening to this, and so I'll catch you on another one.
DJ Boxing Live here. DJ Boxing Live here.
Buster Douglas knocked him out. Buster Douglas, the fat bump, the legend.
Yo, this is Chris Caban, chilling with my man EJ Boxing Live, one of the hottest, dopest boxing channels on YouTube. Check them out.
The boxing beats and rounds on the EJ Live YouTube channel.
And Bethia was the number 10 rated contender, and he had never been knocked down. And Sonny destroyed his mouth. Bethia lost most of his teeth, basically with 1 or 2 left hooks.
Oh shit, boy! What was look at kids sleeping like Manny Pacquiao?
DJ Boxing Live here. DJ Boxing Live here.